everyone, and welcome to the Arthritis Action podcast. My name is Marc. I'm the area coordinator for the charity and also your host. Joining me today is Leah, who's our groups and events manager.
Hi there.
And also Terry, who is our member services manager.
Hello.
Excellent. Welcome both. So before we get started, as this is the first episode, I wanted to explain a little bit about who we are. So Arthritis Action is a UK charity giving practical help to improve the quality of life of people affected by arthritis. So we offer an integrated self-management approach which looks at both the physical and mental health impact of living with arthritis. So in each episode of this podcast, what we'll be doing is we'll be covering a different topic relating to life with arthritis, basically, and chatting to some of our members and some other experts about how to manage it better. So today, we thought to start us off, we would talk about planning and pacing. Pacing is one of the most important skills that anyone living with arthritis is going to need to learn. So once you have arthritis, there is a high chance that you're no longer going to be able to do everything that you used to do exactly the same as you used to do it. So in all likelihood, you're going to need to learn to pace your activities in order to live your life the way that you want to be able to. So the art of pacing is basically, in a nutshell, is kind of setting small but achievable goals and dividing the task into small chunks. Now, what that's going to look like is going to be really different for everyone because, as we all know, arthritis can affect everybody differently. So it's all about making sure that everything is your way and kind of like what's going to suit you best. I mean, I guess I'll put it over to you two as well. I mean, what do you think is sort of so important about pacing with arthritis?
I think it's really important to remember that it takes a long time to learn, and it's something where you have to really know what it is when, say, for example, if you're very busy and if you've, say, got lots of social appointments or you're working, I think, or you've got lots of things to do around the house, I think it's recognizing that it's something that needs to be done, but also the process to get there to learn about pacing might be a bit of a trial and error process. So I think that's really important to remember. It's not always easy, and it can be easier said than done at the same time. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself if you can't quite get it down the first time. I think that's really important. It's about learning how much your body can do and how much time you need to rest as well. So that's really important.
And I'll just add there that it's also important because we talk about exercise and keeping active is an important area of managing arthritis, but you have to pace in order to keep doing that physical activity and exercise. And, we're not just talking about running a marathon, but, things are, being social, being able to work, doing housework and all that. It's important to pace. So yesterday I spoke to a member of our charity, and she doesn't let arthritis defeat her in that she goes for walks, and she goes for long walks, but then on the days where she knows she's done that long walk, she might just do a little short walk into the local town and then take it more easy. So in order to keep being active, it's important to know how to pace.
That's one thing I've definitely heard from sort of a lot of our members and sort of people who come to our groups is if there's something that is going to be a big event, or like if you've got something on that is going to be like a long day, or even if it's an important one or going to be a physically taxing one, then the day before and the day after might then also be something you need to consider. So if you're if you're going to go on holiday, you might actually want to rest completely the day beforehand just to make sure that you're not exhausting yourself on day one. So even if it is a one-day thing, the day before, it can be just as important, and also the day afterwards as well. There has been some people I've spoken to where if they go to something, then they will need to have an additional day at the end of it. So like they're on holiday for 2 days, it needs to be a 3-day thing because they need that additional day to recover before they can go back to work, because they're just going to be too wiped out afterwards, because recovery becomes incredibly difficult for some people with arthritis. It's not as it used to be, like you have a night's rest and then you're fine. That night's rest might actually not be nearly enough, and you might need a full day of recovery plus then another night's rest to get where you need to be again.
Exactly, and that's where planning comes in important. Becomes important with pacing, because you've got to say you're in employment and your job, and you've got to plan for those additional days off just to pace yourself. And it's so you have to sort of not only think about your physical activity, but you've actually got to think about your general day-to-day life and plan for that as well.
So what do you think some of like the biggest challenges that people face with planning and pacing then?
I think it's letting other people know that you might need to do that. So friends or family, it might be that you're not able to stay as long at an event, or you might feel you need to go home early to recover, or it might be traveling to something that might be difficult as well, that might take a lot of energy out of you. And I think it's getting over that barrier and asking for help or support, or not feeling bad that you need to say no, or you've reached the end of what you're able to do that day and you do need to go home and rest. I think that's one big challenge in particular, particularly if you've not got friends maybe that have arthritis themselves, or they just don't understand how you're feeling and what you're going through. Because if you say on a Monday that you'll meet somebody on a Friday, you don't know how you'll be feeling that day. So I think it's about being honest and open. And I think that can be quite difficult. I think that comes with a level of acceptance of having arthritis as well.
I think one big challenge is yourself as well. I think you can be your own worst enemy, because you want to do all of the things that you want to do or you think you can do. Like Marc, I'll take you back to what your introduction, and you were saying that you have to learn to do what you used to do in a different way, and that's where pacing comes in. So that's, I think yourself is a challenge, being your own worst enemy, but not, and knowing you can't do all that you used to be able to do in one day, but actually pace it out over the week.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the fact that a lot of people do feel like they're failing if they don't do enough. But your life is different after you've had arthritis. So you should, instead of kicking yourself and not being able to do what you used to be able to do, it's easier said than done. Like, of course, it's perfectly easy for me just to say this. It's going to be much harder for you to actually implement this. But if you can sort of like switch the attitude to, like, instead of being annoyed at yourself and not having done what you did previously, if you can instead then kind of start to reward yourself and like celebrate the achievements of what you can now do, like because you might be able to improve and like increase the amount of things that you can do through like doing it in small steps and gradually, like starting off with the small goal and then like increasing and building upon it, then being able to build yourself up. And maybe at some point you will be able to get back to what you used to be able to do, but it might be a long road and filled with adjustments that you have to do that. And it's important to celebrate those things as well, because I think that's something that doesn't get done enough, is people just in everyday life as well, just people not celebrating their own achievements enough, like trying to get out of that mindset of like everything's not good enough. Like sometimes you should just be happy with what you have achieved.
I completely agree with that. I think that's a really good point. One of the best quotes that I've heard in the last couple of weeks, and I think it relates to pacing really well, is don't be a hero. I think you have to accept how much you're able to do, and we want to take on things to help somebody else, or we want to be nice to people, and that's completely fine. But that's not something we can do at our own detriment. And I think it's learning that, and learning that other people will eventually be able to understand. And it's about finding enjoyment in the new things that you're able to do. I was speaking to somebody a couple of days ago, and their biggest achievement was walking to the post box. And that's huge. If you've been at home for a long time, or you've not been able to leave your house and you finally found the energy to do that. I think we often look at achievements of having to be a really big thing, but really it can be something like that, something that you've been struggling for a long time, even if it is to do with something around the house or just being in your local vicinity. I think that's a really good thing. And like you said, we definitely don't do that enough.
One thing I do want to come back to is something I think you said earlier on, Terry, about like the difference between pacing and rest, because we've mentioned both of them, but I don't think we've really described kind of what the actual difference is between them. And I'm sure that lots of people will know the answer to this, but for those that don't, who wants a crack at that one?
No, I think it's knowing when you need like rest. Do you mean resting as in knowing when you need to do that and what that and what that entails.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't think we rest enough. I think I was talking to somebody the other day and they said they're always thinking about what's coming next, whether that's what they're going to have for dinner or when they're going to see some family or friends or things they've got to do around the house. And I think nothing needs to be done this instant. Nothing is probably urgent enough that you need to do it now. And your own well-being comes first. But I think recognizing that and fully switching off, saying no to people is extremely difficult, but it's something we all need to learn how to do, and recognizing when we need that, of knowing that if we carry on past a certain point, we're going to be exhausted for, say, the rest of the week. Whereas if we take time to rest, the impact of what we're doing will be a lot less. So it's learning that balance, and it's a really fine line.
I think, yes. And then like when it comes to pacing as well, like one good example I heard of pacing was like if your lawn takes 2 hours to mow, then instead of doing it for 2 hours, you'll just like completely exhaust yourself and you won't be able to. So split it up into 20-minute chunks. It doesn't mean you have to sit there completely still, like resting and doing nothing for that like 20 minutes. You could be doing something completely different, do a different job. So that way, at least like, the same muscles and joints that you're using to do that are then not being used constantly. They're getting a rest while you're doing something else. So it could be anything from like you go start making your dinner, go do a different job in the garden, go do something on your phone or your computer or whatever. You could do that for 20 minutes instead, then go back to it, and then like so you kind of flip-flopping between the two jobs. But that way you're constantly doing things, because I know a big concern a lot of people have is they don't have time to rest, like because they've got too much stuff to do. So perhaps you need to adjust how you rest, rather like, I mean, it is important to have a complete rest, like as Leah was talking about, but I do think it is also, you have to acknowledge that sometimes people's lives don't allow for that, especially when it comes to if you work. Because I know this is something you two have mentioned to me loads of times, like some of the groups you've run.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. And I think as well, it's remembering, say, if we're looking at, say, exercise and activity time, things that you've done around the house still count towards that, still count as movement time. So when it gets to the evening and you think, oh gosh, I've got to do this 30 minutes exercise routine now, it's kind of taking into account everything you've done during the day. And movement and keeping active doesn't have to be, it's not traditional exercise. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be doing an exercise class. It's taking into account everything throughout the day. And something I always say is, if people go swimming, it's not just the process of swimming and bit of being in the pool. It's everything that it takes to get there and to get ready and to get back afterwards. And before you know it, you might be looking at an hour and a half. So it's not just the 30-minute session of exercise. It's putting things into manageable chunks of time.
Indeed. And I was thinking about this as you're both talking, and I was thinking about pacing. If you think about the Olympics or long distance runners, you always have those people at the start that are setting the pace. So they're almost doing the same activity, but a bit slower. So the ones that the elite athletes are going to use that to warm up and then go for it at the end, So it's like almost if you pacing is you can do activity, but do it in a slower way, or as you say, take that sort of time out in between. Whereas rest, I think, is sitting down, putting your feet up, not doing anything. Whereas pacing is you're doing an activity, but maybe not as much as you would like, or maybe you walk a different distance or a shorter distance. So it's doing the activity, but not as much as you might want.
Yeah, definitely. That really reminds me of an anecdote from one of our members that I've used loads in our groups before. But she has this lady, she has a plug-in vacuum cleaner. So she this is such an interesting way of pacing. I absolutely love it. It's got a battery in it, so she plugs it in, charges it up, and then does the hoovering. So when she's going around the house, the thing only lasts about 20 minutes because it's got an old battery in it. But that's perfect for her, because then after 20-30 minutes, whenever it lasts, it dies and she can't do anymore. So it forces her to stop. And she absolutely loves this, because then she'll have to plug it back in a wall, wait another hour till it's charged up, and then she can do more hoovering. So if she had one that would just plug into the wall and you could, with a cable or whatever, she would just do the whole house in one go and she wouldn't stop, and then she'd be exhausted after it. I just thought that was just such like a interesting way of pacing, by like using her old battery that doesn't really last that long as a pacing device. Is just really interesting.
Definitely. And I think that kind of leads on to things that can help you, like gadgets and aids that can be really helpful in supporting pacing, particularly with cooking and gardening and cleaning, and things that are going to make the activity easier rather than struggling on with something that might be painful for your hands, or if you're finding it hard to kneel down. I think that's definitely something else that we need to think about is I need to kind of pace my time and my energy, but how can I make that task easier so it's not as daunting when it comes to actually completing it, so that at the same time you're using less energy to do the same thing.
One thing as well I think is important to remember as well, like, is to remember you can still do everything. We're not saying to stop doing stuff whenever it comes to this, because I know a lot of people do get told like, yeah, you can't do that anymore, you got arthritis. Like, there may be some things that you physically can't do. Like if you used to run marathons and then you get arthritis in your knees, there is a chance that you might not be running marathons anymore, or at least not as well. I don't know. Maybe you can do it. Maybe you're an absolute champ. You can get through that. But I think it's important to make sure you still are doing things and people don't give up. They just start to employ more things like pacing and more planning as well, to make sure that they can do all of the things they want to do, but just do them a bit differently from how they used to.
Definitely. And I think it goes back to, or you use planning to think about your social life, for example. And you in a group in the past, we've heard from someone that wants to do the social activity, so the work social. She wanted to go out with her colleagues after work, but in order to do that, she felt she had to plan not to work that day, so she had to take the day off as holiday in order to go out and enjoy a social life in the evening. So it's knowing that you can do these things, but you have to plan for it and know that you can still go out and enjoy the activity that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So having like the three of us always talk a lot to our members sort of throughout the charity. So I was wondering, what are some of like the main questions that you guys get asked about pacing?
For me, it's how do I do it? How can I get into the mindset of actually pacing? Because I'm always busy. There's people that need me. I've commitments, employment, events. I think that's the one question I get is, so this is what pacing is, but how can I go about it?
And I get a lot of like parents ask, well, how do I pace myself but yet run my household? And it's difficult when people don't, or your family don't necessarily understand what you're going through. So how can you pace and not do the housework or cook dinner, for example, and for family to understand? And it's difficult. And in that instance, you just have to, use tools to overcome that by maybe communicating, and actually talking to friends, talking to family about what you're going through and what you need to do in order to get through that, and to actually, do all those things, all those tasks, and help them understand maybe what it is you need to do to do that.
I was going to say, I think that's communication is definitely key. We talk a lot about I statements and putting yourself in the center of communication. So, for example, if you were planning on meeting a friend for a walk, for example, but you don't feel able to go as far as you maybe would have done, or you felt like as far as you said you would be going when you arranged it, it's not blaming them for it. So rather than saying, oh, you're going too fast for me, I can't keep up, it's flipping that on its head to say, I want to take it slower, or I'm going to take a short break and I can come and meet you afterwards. That's a lot less confrontational. And I think as well that can help people understand what pacing is, because you're expressing any limitations, but then you're also looking at say, a more practical solution of how you can both benefit from that situation without blaming your friend or whoever you're with, because I think most people we know have got our best intentions at heart and they want to help, but if we kind of alienate them and say it's their fault, we can't do something, that's when things become difficult.
The other flip side of it is I have had before people that I don't want to give up that activity. I don't want to slow down. I want to do all that I want to do at the same level that I was doing it before. And then instantly there's that barrier, there's that challenge. We talked about challenges the earlier, and it's almost trying to communicate and trying to get across that actually you have to get past that, and you almost have to, use that phrase, you've got to sort of mourn, get over that, that life, try and say, right, I could do that, but I used to be able to do that, but I can no longer do that. But I can do that activity, but in a different way, or in a more broken up way, and planning those stages where you can rest. And it's trying to get that across to the public and our members. And that's sort of the questions that I get asked as well.
Excellent. Cool. There's one other thing that actually we haven't really touched upon yet, actually. So we keep talking about, obviously about planning and pacing and how to avoid problems and things like that. But the thing is, these days are still going to exist when like a flare up happens. So you've also got to plan for those as well. So there are going to be days for a lot of people where they're just going to be a write-off. No matter what they do, that day is kind of like void. You're not going to get anything done for it. All that's left to do is rest on that day. So I think it's important to plan for those as well.
Definitely.
One of the easiest things to do would just be to fully embrace it. Like whenever you don't feel well, eat some ice cream or some chocolate, or just like slob out on the sofa and have a day like that and fully embrace it. But problem is, depending on how much you flare up, that could then become a bit of a problem for like your health. If you're eating junk food several days a week, all day, because trying to make yourself feel better, there's also you got to start to plan. It's not like just being ill as a one-off where you can do that. This is going to be a regular thing. You've got to start planning this more into your life, and how am I going to deal with these on a regular basis. So do you need to start batch cooking and freezing loads of stuff? That's one that we found to be really helpful with some people, because you still want to eat a healthy, nutritious meal or something like that. And this works even for just for pacing in general. If you've got a bunch of stuff frozen in your freezer, you just stick it in a microwave and your meal's done. You don't have to put any effort into this whatsoever. So maybe utilizing those days when you're full of beans, and then, make yourself, do a nice easy meal that's big batch cook, freeze half of it. And then you're good to go on those days when you don't have the ability to do things.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. And I think as well, it's, for example, things where if you are experiencing a flare up, things like brushing your teeth, getting ready, or having a shower. I was speaking to somebody and she said, even if she only manages to say brush her hair for 15 seconds, she knows that she's done something. And I think actually looking at the really minute details of how long to spend on something, to really try your best to get to that point, and then where your limits are, is kind of giving something a go and seeing how you get on, rather than putting too much pressure on yourself that you need to spend however long washing or brushing your hair. It's doing the bare minimum to kind of keep yourself feeling well during that time.
Exactly. And I was thinking that about a survival kit, right? If you were going to a desert island, what would you take with you? And it's when you have to plan for that, right? And you think, well, what do I need in my kit? Well, let's pack a book, because I can sit down, I can rest, I can read a book. Let's look on the Arthritis Action website and go through those distraction techniques, those deep breathing exercises, the visualization to distract you from that flare up or that pain you're experiencing. Let's do the batch cooking and keep those in the freezer. Actually, let's prepare my friends and family and say there might be a day where I'm going to have a flare up and I might need some help. Is it okay to call on you that day and just say, can you come and maybe just buzz my dinner in the microwave? Do you know, and it's things like that, having that survival kit and, you know, ticking stuff off and preparing practically for that. You know, chuck a chocolate bar in that survival kit. That's okay, you know, or some fruit. Do you know what I mean? And it's having that, you know, almost like an overnight bag to prepare for that day.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Me too. That's great.
Although the one thing there's another thing I did want to bring up today as well at one point was alcohol. So again, that probably shouldn't be part of your flare-up kit, admittedly. However, you might want a flare-up kit for that. Exactly. So again, like, it's another thing that, you know, will happen. We've all had a drink at some point, and again, just planning in those days, making sure that you can do all these things, obviously with alcohol, depending if you're on medication or anything like that, you do want to talk to your doctor, you know, find out from them what you can and can't do when it comes to alcohol. But again, it does come with that social life, you know, especially in Britain, a large part of social culture is through pubs. We are quite the drinking nation. So it is something that's going to have to be considered, you know, how much can you take? And then is that also something that will be planned into your, like, if you're going out for a night out, do you know kind of what your limit is? It sounds a little bit like, you know, I'm being your dad, but it is just like, you know what your limits are. So that way you can enjoy your evening kind of to the fullest without having too much of a detriment the following day.
Definitely.
And the other side is, I've spoken to members before who can't drink alcohol or drink wine because they've in their words suffered for 2 weeks afterwards with their body reacting and that. So they've learned that. But actually, if you you know, with the medication, yes, you have to be careful. Speak to your GP, speak to the doctors; they're the experts. And also, if you're going out, you might be going to a pub or a restaurant, and then you've got food that comes into account. And food is one of the big questions we get is, what can I eat or what can't eat? And you know, that's where we've got an excellent resource on our website. You know, our members can speak to our dietitian about that side of things. But it's knowing what you can eat through, you know, doing food diaries and stuff like that, and what you can drink, and actually being honest with people and just saying, look, you know, I'd love to come out. I might only be on tap water tonight, but that's fine because I'm going to be a cheap round for you.
Excellent. Cool. Right. So I suppose it's probably, as you mentioned just then, Terry, actually, it'd be a good thing to let people know is about what kind of services we have available for them, to let them, how can they follow? What more stuff can we give them and what more can we do for them?
Yeah. So I'll split this into what's on our generic on our website. So open to everyone. So there's excellent resources, fact sheets, information on exercise, on diet, on planning, pacing. There are videos on our online self-management resource that you can view. There are exercises on there for distraction techniques like deep breathing, visualization, muscle relaxation. And then we've got our membership side. So as a membership charity, our members can access diet consultations. They can access our subsidized treatments with a local physiotherapist or osteopath. Arthritis Action pays £30 towards each of the 2 subsidized treatments each year of membership. We've got our personalised member pathway, which is more of a hands-on supportive service, and our Connect service where members can receive a phone call from another member as just to share hints and tips and experiences. All of the information is on our website.
And the address for that is
www.arthritisaction.org.uk.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And should anyone want to send an email, or you've got a question or something you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, you can send us an email at podcast@arthritisaction.org.uk. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll speak to you all next time. Cheers. Bye-bye.